Hey, hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel where we talk about stuff. Yeah, I was gonna say the other one, but I was like, something's off there. Welcome back to the channel where we talk about stuff. Woo! Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Very big thank you to everyone who has supported the channel over the last 29 and a half years. Time is flying. Welcome to It Looks Like It's About to Hit the Fan. And I no and I really need everyone to be on board, not next to the fan as it's happening. I just watched, actually, I'm always watching these videos. There was one that I just saw, and it was like, oh, okay, people are finally talking about this. The discussion in the video revolved around the Fed lowering interest rates. We know, we've been there, we've heard multiple times, and then the Fed started lowering interest rates. Cool, got it, amazing, fantastic. The secondary part of the video was them talking about next year. If you've at some, I don't know how you did it, maybe you're made of magic. If you missed any of these videos, next year, we are expecting a dramatic decline in the valuation of the world reserve currency. This isn't a joke. This isn't being dramatic. This isn't me trying to be like, oh, how do what? No. Remember, I told you recently I was telling a friend, and they were like, well, how do you know it's going to happen? Where'd you hear that from? I didn't hear anything about that. And it's like, well, that's cool that you didn't hear about it because I'm hearing about it every single gosh darn day. We've heard a lot about de-dollarization, countries moving away from the dollar, banks moving away from the dollar. Do you remember around summertime? In a video I was saying, because we heard that the sovereign wealth fund, I believe Norway had purchased several, like $30-40 million worth of Bitcoin or something like that. I forgot exactly what the numbers was, but it was like the country purchased Bitcoin. And then we heard that through SEC filings, there were all these like mega banks. The bank, was it the Bank of Montreal? There were like 3 big banks in Canada. There were multiple in Mexico. There were a lot in Europe who had all filed SEC filings in with the USA because of their purchases. And when your purchases of a security through the ETFs is like over a certain level, you have to register. You have to say like, we are going to be purchasing this much. We had all these numbers jumbled together, and it was multiple billions of dollars. And I was like, doesn't it seem weird that these countries and governments and central banks weren't throwing billions of dollars at gold, at silver, moving their money into real estate? It was constantly Bitcoin over and over and over. What we are currently seeing, my friends, is a debasement trade. The US, so the problem, maybe the word's not even problem. I think a lot of people are relatively new to the cryptocurrency space, and it's not like I've been here since 2008 myself, but I remember a lot of the OGs within the space, how they would talk about things like the dominoes that were to fall as we eventually moved into an era of watching and witnessing fiat currencies collapsing. Back in 2017, it seemed fever dream-ish. No one could really imagine the US dollar collapsing, not doing well. We'd hear about it all the time. That country in Africa, of course they have $1 billion bills. You know, they're just, that's just how it is. That country in Latin America, of course they're going through it. There's never a real conception that it would actually happen to the thing that, at least the thing that I grew up with, that we were always told was the strongest form of money on the planet, what have you. The issue is that when you realize what the actual numbers are, someone says, and I'm paraphrasing here, someone said something years ago, once you realize how bad it actually is, that's when you get into crypto. There was no real concept in my mind. I knew what inflation was in 2012. No real impact on my life. I would see cheese in the supermarket go up by 5 cents. The burrito that I went to go get, it was 20 cents more. There wasn't like a dramatic spike in things on a daily basis. When you realize how much debt these countries are in, how much each person in the US technically owes as part of that debt, the devaluation, the de-dollarization, and then the other part that should have really, really rattled people was hearing daily these companies and countries and governments and central banks not only moving away from the dollar, but, and I dare say secretly through SEC filings, we're purchasing $35 million worth of Bitcoin, $110 million worth of Bitcoin, $48 million. And it's like, okay, well, clearly something is actually happening. This guy's back in the news and he's kind of ringing the bell, sounding the alarm. I don't know. He's doing something and it's quite loud. Apparently where we are right now, according to Paul Tudor Jones, is we're at the beginning of the debasement trade. That is to say, everyone is basically looking for something to trade their money into as the value of the US dollar gets debased, as it continues to do absolutely terrible and isn't going to do any better next year. Part of the video that I was telling you earlier that I was looking at, the woman was saying, she was like, and I could have literally given her a standing ovation as I was watching it, because I was like, I don't know why it took me so long to find a video or anyone talking about it. She said the people with the assets are going to do extremely well in 2026. Her idea was that there's a lot of noise right now around corporate entities who are like the corporate landlords who are planning on, next year, they're planning on massive purchases within the property market. She was saying, and I'll use the W word, when we see the new head of the Fed lower interest rates down to 1%, Google it, that's when we're going to see a literal skyrocket in value of assets. If you put two and two together, something starts to make a little bit of sense. What have we continuously heard about the cryptocurrency market's prices for 2026, 2027, and 2028? It's only one thing. We've heard from at least at this point, at least a good 22 analysts, economists, they're expecting by 2028, Bitcoin's price is going to be 600,000. By 2029, Bitcoin's price is going to be over $1 million. By the time we get to 2032, we're looking at a $1.5 to a $2 million Bitcoin. How do you get to those numbers unless you are literally putting your chips on the idea of, and I would dare even say the reality of, the US dollar falling so much in value that other assets would move up? And then it also loops back into all these countries in 2025 buying huge amounts of Bitcoin. It all lines up, completely, entirely all lines up. Even if you've been looking, it's kind of, I wouldn't dare say the term fringe news, but you kind of have to know where to look. If you look at the actual consolidation of assets and the amount of companies who've been announcing that they're not only doing stock buybacks, but they're also like accumulating, like we're going to be purchasing 20 million of that company. They're rapidly trying to accumulate as many assets as possible with the expectation of asset prices rising dramatically. The being priced out of these assets, it's already there and it's so crystal clear. So many times I've told you before, and I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences. when I tell people about investing, how to get into something, nothing makes their day brighter than hearing about real estate. Everyone wants to get into, everyone wants to buy. If I ever mention that there are other assets, other things to get into, you can get into stocks, you can get into mutual funds, you can buy fractions of things, you can buy fractions of crypto. It doesn't really work. The problem is on multiple accounts. What we have now is a housing market that's far too expensive for normal people. Even if interest rates do fall down to 1, the average person doesn't have $135,000 in their account to be able to afford a mortgage. Nonetheless, the average person doesn't even have $500. You're not going to the bank and go, hey, I have $12.25 in my account. If I could just have a 30-year mortgage, I totally promise that I'm going to pay you back. It's not going to be a thing. And then on the other side, the actual affordable assets that people could be buying, they're ignoring because they've been told their entire lives the only kind of asset that you should be buying is real estate. You need a 5-family home. I told you, you've seen these videos on YouTube. They drive me absolutely insane. These people who have, they were born wealthy. They have 150 homes, 150 rental apartments. And then they tell people, yeah, you should only be buying a 5-family so-and-so. And it's like the average person doesn't even have jack diddly squat in their bank account. So what we have now is the perfect storm of nonsense and wealth that it's a literal shame because you would not believe how many times on this channel or my other channel I've said the words, if this happens, if this could happen, this could be a thing. And then 6 months later, people go, well, you predicted that this was gonna, and it's like, English is not that difficult of a language. And I just assume that many of you speak it perfectly if you hear me say the words, if, it's because I'm not a psychic and I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And I can't tell you exactly 6 months. So I'm just basically going off of the information that we've been given by all these people. If everything does actually happen the way that we've been hearing, new head of the Fed, interest rates down to 1%, asset prices are going to lose their minds. Paul Tudor Jones said, we are currently looking at this idea of what he's calling, he says, the world is bracing for a speculative frenzy between a combination of Bitcoin, crypto, gold, technology, and real estate. We are in the midst of this idea. He also issued a stark warning about the Federal Reserve and their future actions regarding interest rates. I think 2026 is going to be nuts. I've said this before and I will say it again. I think people are hyper underestimating just what's happening. I've seen people even before, not that it's like a whatever. I've seen people before saying that there's no, I don't understand. I've seen people saying before that they think that there's no real risk of the US dollar being devalued even further. I don't know what world you're living in. You devalue your local currency to get more people doing business within your borders. You make your currency more attractive by being less expensive so that people will literally go, we can open factories, we can do these things. But the problem is that one of the main flaws of fiat currencies is the fact that it needs to be printed to be able to do so. So every more that you print, you devalue it. Got it. You make things in supermarkets and stores more expensive. Got it. But you also raise asset prices. So the normal people, they're can't say that word. The other people with the assets, they'll do just fine. The issue is that the only people who are going to benefit are the people who can build the factories, who have enough money to buy the homes and all these other things. We are, and I told you before, I give it to about summertime. My pendulum currently, for those of you who are wondering, resides between March and July of next year. March is the time that I'm giving to see if the 4-year cycle is actually broken. And if we just continuously see prices moving up By the time we get to March, usually the bull run is over. That's the way that it's always been historically. If we get to March and prices are still moving up, then okay, we gotta throw some money at the market. By the time we get to summer, that's the time frame for the additional debate, like hyper debasement of the US dollar. That's like we should know specifically by summer 2026, like, okay, the world is about to literally shift all of their money into Bitcoin. And I'll reiterate once again, there was recently someone in the news, I don't know if you saw the video, he was saying everyone's really excited for $1 million Bitcoin. But you're not understanding that if we get to $1 million Bitcoin, the US dollar becomes garbage. It literally means trillions of dollars worth of wealth has lost faith in that institution, and they've exclusively thrown it towards Bitcoin. When you get to $1 million Bitcoin, the dollar is done. Every other fiat currency, they're also completely suffering. But then at that point, they are so weak. They're so weak from having like all this money printed to try and keep them propped up to get other people to do business there. People continuously go, well, if Bitcoin's at 1 million, it might go to 1.5. The price begins to rise, more money gets printed to try and stop all of it, and more money keeps getting thrown into Bitcoin. That's literally the loop where we are. By next summer, it should be crystal clear. We are in very interesting financial times right now. Very, 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 very. Yes. Paul Tudor Jones says we are currently at the debasement trade. He thinks it's going to rock markets in the months ahead, and that we are currently bracing for the speculative frenzy within the markets as everyone looks for anything else that isn't the dollar. Hope everyone has been saving money. Hope everyone hasn't been buying frivolous things that you don't need. I assume some of you have sold things around your house that you have no need for, that you just haven't been using, that have dust on them, that could give you extra money to have in your pocket. I do hope that you've all enjoyed. I do hope you all are having a great day, a great morning, a great afternoon, a great evening, wherever you are, wherever you might be. I do hope that it is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting, and I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.